afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to our fourth day of Adam Smith Week. I'm very excited about today. I've been very excited and appreciate how all of you have come out this entire week. There are a few things I would just like to say as the week is sort of going out here. A few thank yous that I want to make sure I get out. First off, I'm Professor Peter Calcano. I'm the professor of economics here at the College of Charleston and the director for the Center for Public Choice and Market Process. As we get started today, I want to make sure that if you've been coming to our events, that I give some appropriate thank yous. One is to Dr. Walker today for letting us borrow his class. I'm going to confess that was not a large tax on him in a minute, and why. Aside from minimizing his efforts, he's getting great payoffs from this, as I'll explain in a second. The other I would like to recognize is the Department of Economics. They have been a major supporter of Adam Smith Week, and I want to say thank you to them and for their support. I'm going to throw something out there that I think would be kind of interesting. So, if you've been walking around campus and you're near the Satilli Theater, look up. On the marquee, it actually says "Celebrate Adam Smith Week." Right? And really excited that the college is acknowledging us in this way, right? But I know that all of you have phones, and I know all of you are on Instagram, right? I would love for you all to go take a picture and take a selfie of yourself under that marquee and post it to Instagram. Send it to me, email it to the center at cpm.cfc.edu. Prizes, right? But I would love to see it. Send it to us so that we can post it on our Instagram. I think it would. I would love that opportunity. As I said, I'm very excited about today's program for one reason, and that is I'm trying here not to go all fanboy. Steven Landsburg has been an economist that I have admired for a very long time, and his books, The Armchair Economist and Fair Play, I have been using almost my entire academic career. For those of you who are in Dr. Walker's class, you have been reading The Armchair Economist, right? You understand this, so you understand what a real privilege it is to be able to actually have Steven Landsburg here. And so, I'm very excited about this. Let me just wrap up here before I bring up our market process scholar to introduce Dr. Landsburg. I remind you that we have one more event this evening. It is also with Dr. Landsburg, right? At 6 o'clock tonight here back in Wells Fargo Auditorium. And that we have information about the Center for Public Choice and Market Process, and about the Market Process Scholars Program, which is our mentoring program, and one that if you have been excited about the week's events and you've been interested in the center, I would encourage you to take a look at. Tomorrow is our last event. It's at noontime, and I'm hoping that if these events have given you pause, if they've made you think, and if you think that economics is something interesting, that you will come out tomorrow to take 202. We're going to be talking about the econ major here at the College of Charleston. So I want to bring up at this moment Stephanie Tansey. She is one of our market process scholars, which is our mentoring program here as part of the Center for Public Choice and Market Process, to introduce Dr. Landsburg.
Stephanie, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Steven Landsburg. He earned his PhD in math from the University of Chicago and is currently an economics professor at Rochester University. He is the author of many successful books, two of which Dr. Calcano stated: The Armchair Economist, Fair Play, More Sex and Safe Sex, The Unconventional Wisdom of Economics, and The Big Questions, Tackling Problems of Philosophy with Ideas from Mathematics, Economics, and Physics. If that wasn't impressive enough, he's also appeared in many nationally published journals such as Slate, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, you name it, he's very successful. So without further ado, he will be giving a talk on Is the World Overpopulated and How Do We Know?
world have too many people? Now, if this is gonna,
Now it's black.
does the world have too many people? Does the world have too many people or too few? Let's start with some easier warm-up questions so that we get used to the problem of figuring out whether the world has too much of something or too little of something. It says, do I have too many socks or too few? Well, you know, every time I go into a store and I think about buying a pair of socks, I look at the price, I think about how much room I've got in my drawers, I think about how much I need these socks. I make a decision, and you know something? There's no reason to imagine that any of you are going to do a better job than I am going to do about deciding whether I need another pair of socks or not. For that reason, I'm going to say I've got pretty much exactly the right number of socks, thank you very much. The decisions I make about how many socks to buy affect only me. And the basic insight here is that when your decisions affect only yourself and don't affect anyone else, you've got all the incentives to make the decisions that are right. There's no reason to think that anybody else could have done any better. By contrast, let's ask whether the world has too much pollution or too little. First, let's observe that certainly the right amount of pollution is not zero. In a world with zero pollution, there would be no modern transportation, we would not have buildings like this. I certainly couldn't have made it to Charleston with anything like the ease that I did. We would not have cars, we would not have skyscrapers, we would not have many of the things that we want to have. So pollution is a cost that we cheerfully put up with, or if not cheerfully, we at least choose to put up with in order to have other things that we want. That means that the right amount of pollution is not zero, and once you've admitted that the right amount is not zero, then you've got the question, do we currently have too much or too little? The answer to that is not obvious. But I think I know the answer. I think probably the world has too much pollution. And the reason I believe the world has too much pollution is that the people who make decisions about how much to pollute are making decisions that affect not only themselves, but also other people. When the costs of your actions spill over onto other people, you tend to do too much of those things. If you're not bearing the cost of somebody else's suffering the consequences of the choices you're making, your choices tend to be biased in the direction of imposing too many costs on other people. In the same, oops, what did I do wrong? That's the wrong button. That's very much the wrong thing. Sorry about this. There we go. In the same way, just as we have too much pollution, we have too few volunteers to go out and clean up the public parks. Because when you go out and clean up a public park, the benefits of your actions spill over onto other people. And when the benefits of your actions spill over onto other people, when you don't enjoy those benefits yourself, you tend to do too little of those activities. So the world has too much pollution, too few people picking up trash in the parks. The way we tell whether the world has too much or too little of something is by asking what were the incentives that faced the decision makers that decided how much pollution we would have. We look at the incentives faced by the decision makers. Now, when it comes down to the question of do we have too many people or too few people, the relevant decision makers, we want to ask whether the decision makers felt all the costs of their actions. Did they feel all the benefits of their actions? The relevant decision makers are the parents and the prospective parents choosing their family size. So the right question to ask if you want to know whether the world has too many people or not is what incentives do parents face when they're deciding whether to have another child or not, and do they feel all the costs and benefits of their actions, to what extent do those costs and benefits spill on others. So I want to make a little chart here, the benefits and the costs of having another child. But we don't just want to list benefits and list costs. We want to break those into two subcategories, what we'll call the private benefits and the costs, the ones that the parents actually feel, the ones they take account of when they're making those decisions, and the spillover costs and benefits. If you're taking an economics course, you've probably learned to call these the external costs and benefits, the externalities. I'll use the word spillover, which I think is a little more graphic, the benefits and the costs that affect people outside the family. So let's start filling in these squares one by one. First of all, the private benefits. What are the benefits of having a child? Well, the big one, most of us love our children, and we have children because we expect to love them. Other things come into play as well. Sometimes you have more kids because you need help on the farm, or because you think they're going to take care of you in their old age. Those are the private benefits of having children. And those are the things, why am I listing them? I'm listing them just to keep track of the fact that we're not going to have to account for this stuff because the parents have already accounted for it for us. What we're really going to be interested in is those spillovers. I'm putting stuff here in the left column just to remind us that these are the things that are not relevant to our question. What are the costs of having a child? Private costs, the costs that the parents feel. You got to feed your kid, you got to clothe your kid, you're up late nights with your kids when your kids are sick. Later on, you're bailing them out of jail. All of those things are costs that the parents feel when you're deciding to have another kid. You think about those benefits, you think about those costs, you weigh them against each other, and you make a decision, just like I make decisions about my socks. But there are other things, other costs and benefits that spill over. Let's go to the spillover benefits, the things that affect people outside your family when you decide to have a kid. If you have a child, that child will be available as a trading partner for other people. People who are strangers, trading partner. That means a possible employee, a possible employer, somebody who might engage in a business with your child. So those people all benefit from your decision to having another child, and those benefits are felt by people other than you, other than the decision maker. Friendship. Your kids go through life and they make a lot of friends, and those friends are happy that they're here. That's a benefit that you don't feel, that other people feel. It's like when you go out and pick up trash in the park, other people get the benefits of that. If you have a kid, that kid has friends, those friends are getting benefits of your decision to have a child. Love. I know, you're in college, you're 18, you're 19 years old, sometimes you think you're never going to find love, but you will. Pretty much everybody finds somebody at some point in life who loves them. And the people who love you are going to be glad you're here. And they're going to be glad you're here in ways that benefit them and don't directly benefit your parents. Diversity. The more people we have in the world, the more diverse the world will be. That means there will be people who share your unusual interests. If you love chamber music, if you love parasailing, if you love Ethiopian restaurants, if you love Adam Smith Week at the College of Charleston, you need a critical mass of people to make those things happen. There cannot be parasailing unless there's a critical mass of people who want to parasail. There cannot be Ethiopian restaurants unless there's a critical mass of people who want to eat there. The more people there are, the more diversity we have, the more opportunities there are to share in other people's interests. So the spillover benefits of having kids include more trading partners, friendship, love, diversity, and the big one, other people have ideas, and you get to copy other people's ideas all through your life. You see things that other people are doing, and you say, that looks like a good idea. And you copy it. And at every one of those moments, you can be thankful that that person was born. You can be thankful that that person's parents decided to have a child. People are the source of ideas. Ideas, in turn, are key to our prosperity. The reason we are as rich as we are, and I'll talk in a few minutes about how very rich we are, the reason we are as rich as we are is mostly because everybody has been copying ideas from other people over the generations and figuring out better ways to do things, better ways to produce things. And then to complete this sort of virtuous circle, when there are more people, there are more ideas. When there are more ideas, there's more prosperity. When there's more prosperity, we can afford to feed more people, and so we get more people. And Michael Kramer, who's an economist at Harvard, has actually written a paper called Economic Growth from 1 million BC until the present, where he argues that all over the world for the last million years, there is evidence of this virtuous circle. Sometimes it gets broken, sometimes something happens that prevents one of these links in the chain from being followed through. But over and over and over again, what you see in history is that places where there are more people, you get more ideas, more prosperity, more prosperity. Partly that's because in a world with twice as many people, you have twice as many geniuses. The ones in red there are my geniuses. Okay? Here's the smaller world where you've got 2 geniuses. Here's the world with twice as many people where you've got 4 geniuses. Geniuses are good. We all copy ideas from them. If we have more people, we have twice as many people. On average, we're going to have twice as many of them. But it's better than that. It's more than twice as good. Because, first of all, ideas last forever. If we have a genius in today's generation, our children are going to benefit from that genius, and our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, and so on. So an increase in the population at one time does not just mean more ideas available at that time, it means more ideas available forever. Geniuses tend to inspire each other. They copy each other's ideas, they improve each other's ideas, they collaborate. So 4 geniuses in many ways is better than 2. Working together there, we have, again, the term you might have learned if you're taking economics classes is increasing returns to scale in the production of ideas. Now, we also should acknowledge that the opposite can also be true. Sometimes geniuses inhibit each other. Sometimes geniuses get in each other's way. Sometimes a very smart person says, well, I'm not going to bother working on this because I think this other guy is very smart, he's going to beat me to it anyway. So it's not always true that we have those increasing returns, but more often than not, and again, there's a lot of research on this. Most recently, Paul Romer, who just won the Nobel Prize in economics, has a lot of research on this, showing that by and large, when we have a greater number of very innovative people, they make each other more innovative, not less. Beyond that, a larger market inspires more effort. If you can sell, if you have an idea to produce something and you can sell it to twice as many people, you're going to work harder to produce that item than if you only had a small number of people to sell it to. And so a bigger population not only provides more people with great talent, it also provides more incentive for people with less talent to work harder and to develop their talents. Those of us who are not quite geniuses, but still have something to contribute, we will work harder to contribute more if we have more people to share it with, more people to sell it to, more people to collaborate with. Those are all reasons why we should be thankful that the world has more people. Of course, we're also going to have to weigh these benefits against costs. We'll come to the cost in a moment. But before I do that, I want to say a few more words about the size of the benefits that we get from copying other people's ideas. Modern humans first emerged about 100,000 years ago. And then for the next 99,800 years, nothing happened. Nothing. Oh, there were some fights, there were some wars, there was the invention of agriculture, there was the Renaissance. None of that mattered. None of that mattered in the sense that up until just a couple of hundred years ago, up until the time of the Industrial Revolution, starting roughly 1800, everybody who ever lived, with almost no exceptions, everybody who ever lived right around the subsistence level, on the modern equivalent of $400, $500, $600 a year. Barely getting by, not always sure they were going to have enough food to make a few ends meet. There were, of course, exceptions, and the exceptions make it into the history books. There were kings and queens and nobilities. but they were numerically insignificant. So that if you had been born at any time in the first 100,000 years of human history, the first 99,800 years, the odds are astronomical that you would have lived right at the subsistence level, just like your parents, just like your grandparents, just like your children, just like your grandchildren. There's a timeline. 100,000 years, the red part here, that's where the Industrial Revolution starts. That's where people start to lift themselves out of this state of nature. Then, around 1800, something changed. Incomes, at least in the West, started to grow. At first, they grew by about 0.5% a year. People's incomes on average, having never shown any sign of growing at any time in the past, started to grow at about 0.5% a year. By 1830, in England and the United States, incomes were growing at about 1.5%. Since 1960, incomes in the West have been growing at about 2.3% a year. That's an average for the United States. It's also roughly an average for the world. And when I say incomes growing by 2.3%, those are real incomes. Those are incomes adjusted for inflation. So that's actual purchasing power growing at about 2.3%. I'm stating these percentages. Let me try and drive some of those percentages. Suppose you are a middle-class American family earning a modern middle-class income of about $50,000. Then if we continue that 2.3% growth rate, the 2.3% growth rate that we have had on average since 1960, if that continues for the next 25 years, and if your children occupy that same middling rung on the economic ladder that you do, so no progress in that sense, 25 years from now, 25 years from now, your children will be making the inflation-adjusted equivalent of $89,000. And then another 25 years after that, your grandchildren will be making the inflation-adjusted equivalent of $158,000 per year. From 50 to 89 to 158 in 2 generations. That's the power of economic growth, and that's what we would see. If I extrapolate that out another 400 years or so, and if I assume that we continue to have the growth rate of 2.3% that we've been having for the last several decades, but that's a very conservative extrapolation, because in fact the growth rate has been nothing but increase since it first rose above 0 200 years ago. We just saw it. It was 0.5%, then it was 1.5%, then it was 2%, then it was 2.3%. I'm assuming in these extrapolations that it's going to level off at that 2.3% and not continue to increase. If the growth rate continues at that 2.3%, then in 400 years, your descendants will have an inflation-adjusted, this is in terms of today's dollars, income of $1 million per day, unless, of course, they rise above mediocrity and live even better. This is a graph of United States per capita income in fixed dollars from roughly the time of the founding until very recently. That little dip you see up there near the top is the Great Recession. The bigger dip you see down there in the 1930s is the Great Depression. The Great Depression. Here's what happened during the Great Depression. Incomes fell back to where they had been about 25 years earlier. People found that intolerable. People had to live a lifestyle that their grandparents had taken for granted, that their grandparents viewed as the best lives anybody had ever lived in the course of history, and they found that intolerable. That is how much we have internalized the idea that life is supposed to keep on getting better. But that's new. That's brand new. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, nobody expected their transportation to get better from one year to the next. Nobody expected their entertainment to get better from one year to the next. We've come to expect that. Nobody, no 19th century politician ever asked, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Because nobody in the 19th century ever expected to be better off than they were 4 years ago. Or 18th century, I should say. By the 19th century they did, but the 18th century, nobody expected to be better off than they were 4 years ago. So we've had all that improvement in income, but it's not just income. It's not just income that's been improving. Let's look at leisure, the amount of leisure time we have. In 1910, the average work week in the United States was 65 hours. By 2010, it was 33 hours. In 1910, 6% of workers ever took a vacation. In 2010, virtually all workers had vacations at some time or other. Retirement in 1910, men at age 65, 65-year-old men, and in 1910, 65 was really old. In 1910, 65 was really old. Only 26% of them retired. Today, 90% of 65-year-old men are retired. Child labor in 1910 was common. Today, it's essentially unheard of. And housework. The average housekeeper in 1910 spent 12 hours a day on cooking, cleaning, laundry, sewing. By 2010, it was 1.5 hours. Here is the typical housewife's laundry day in 1910. First, she ports water to the stove, heats it up over coals, carries it over to her buckets and pours it in, washes the clothes by hand, wrings them out either by hand or using a mechanical wringer, which is back-breaking work if you do it long enough, and then goes on to the most impressive part of all of the job, which is the ironing using big, heavy flat irons that are hung continuously over a hot stove. The process in 1900 takes her 8.5 hours, and she walks a mile in the process. We know this because the United States government used to hire researchers to follow housewives around, watch them do their chores, and write down every step they took. And we know from those reports that in 1900, the average laundry day was 8.5 hours of labor and a mile of walk. By 1940, we've got washing machines. And now laundry takes 2.5 hours. You only walk 665 feet in the process. Today, I throw my laundry in the machine, I forget about it, and if you have the newest model, it emails you to let you know when it's done. So you don't have to spend even a minute monitoring. Other routine household tasks 100 years ago included, you see, houses did not mostly have central heating. They did not have running water. So other tasks included lugging 7 tons of coal and 9,000 gallons of water around the house every year. Just since 1965, the average American has gained 6 leisure hours per week. That's the equivalent of 7 extra vacation weeks per week. So income is better, leisure's getting better. It's not just that, it's also the quality of the goods that we buy. That's the kind of television we had when I was a kid. It was black and white, it got 3 channels, it showed television programs that you had to watch at the time they were on. There was no way to delay them and watch them later. And every now and then you had to get up and give that set a good smack on the side so the picture would settle down and stop moving all over the place. This is what our typewriters looked like. I remember the big innovation when they finally came out with a typewriter that had a delete key. You could hit that key, it would go back, it would erase the last character you had typed. If you wanted to go back 2 characters, you were out of luck. Ulcers. If you had an ulcer 50 years ago, as my father did, you suffered terribly. You suffered terribly. There were all kinds of complicated medical procedures that you went through and you suffered for years. Today, you take a pill and they cure it. If you have any doubt about how much better things have gotten, I encourage you to go over to the library, find yourself a 40 or 50-year-old Sears catalog, look through it, and ask yourself if there's anything in that catalog you would be willing to buy. Make it a fair comparison, triple the prices to adjust for inflation. And ask yourself if there's anything that, if you do that experiment, I guarantee you will be astonished at how awful the stuff was that was available in those days. Or take medical care. We hear a lot about how medical care is provided very inefficiently, and that's true. We hear a lot about how the system could be better, and that's true. But I ask you this, would you rather have 1970 quality medical care at 1970 prices, or today's quality medical care at today's prices? I'm going to guess that if you are at all well informed, that's a no-brainer. Everybody who knows anything about what medicine could do 40 years ago, 50 years ago, compared to today, will take today's medicine. That has to mean that despite all of the imperfections in the system, medical care is a better bargain now than it ever was. In fact, this is a pretty shocking number. If you measure the quality of medical care by any of the standard metrics, such as longevity, average lifespan, or infant mortality, or any of the other standard metrics, and if you adjust for the AIDS epidemic, which you could argue either way about whether we should make an adjustment for that, but there is an argument to be made that that was sort of a one-time thing that does not really speak to the long-term trends in the quality of medical care. So you might or might not go along with me on adjusting for that, but if you do, then what you will find is no matter what metric you're using, whether it's longevity or infant mortality or pretty much anything else, the medical outcomes that we are getting today in the poorest parts of the third world are about identical to what we were getting in the United States 40 years ago. That's how much medical care has improved in the last 40 years. We have gone from what they're seeing in the worst parts of the third world right now to what we're seeing in the United States. When you ask people, is the world overpopulated? There's always someone in the audience who wants to say, oh, well, wait, there's a limit on the number of people the earth can support. That's the person who has never given a dime's worth of thought to this question. Because of course there's a limit to the number of people the earth can support. We all know that. What does that prove? It proves that it is possible to have too many people. We all know it's possible to have too many people. We also all know it's possible to have too few people. None of us would want to live in a world where there are only 3 of them. We all know it's possible to have too many. We all know it's possible to have too few. None of that speaks at all to the question of, do we currently have too many or too few? Do we currently have too many or too few? The only way you can answer that is, as with any question about do we have too much or too little of something, looking at the incentives that the decision makers were facing, looking in particular at the spillover costs and benefits, the costs and benefits that the decision makers did not account for, and trying to figure out which is bigger and which is smaller. Let me just try and illustrate that with a little fable. Suppose we have 2 families living on identical plots of land. So those are 2 plots of land there that our 2 families live on. One of those families practices zero population growth. Every generation they have just enough kids to maintain the size of the family. They're all living on that same size plot of land forever. The other family, the one on the left, doubles the size of the family every year. So every generation. Next generation, they're each living on half as much land, and then half as much of that, and half as much and half as much. Pretty soon they're all living on these little postage stamps. Is that a social problem? As long as the costs and benefits don't spill outside the family, this is not a social problem. This is an opportunity to celebrate diversity. One family preferred to be rich. One family preferred to have a lot of grandchildren. There's no reason to second guess that any more than you would want to second guess my choice about how many socks to buy. As long as the decisions are not spilling over. These people said, well, our kids are going to be crowded, but we'll have the advantage of having lots of kids. These people said, our kids are going to have lots of space. Different people weigh those things differently, they make different choices. That's okay. The only time you have a social problem, and beyond that, people in both families have got a lot of reasons to be glad that the other family is there making a different decision than they do. Those guys are going to be glad to have all these trading partners. They're going to be glad to have all these potential employees. They're going to be glad to have all of these potential friends and all of these potential mates. And these guys are going to be glad there's some rich people over there who are building factories who might be able to hire us. It's good to have diversity. It's good to have diversity. The problem, if there is a problem, comes in if these people over here say, hey, we're poor and they're rich, let's start an army and go over and take some land. That's bad. That's a cost. That would go in my bottom right box there. That would be something that would count in the direction of saying maybe there are too many people. But again, that's the kind of thing you need to focus on if you want to answer these questions. I have one child, a daughter, and that's her. We stopped after one because we weighed the costs and benefits and we said, here's what another kid is going to cost us, and here's what we think we can gain from that. In one way or another, we weighed all sorts of very personal considerations there, and we decided that for us, one was the right number. And around the world, there are all these different families making decisions that we should have one, we should have two, we should have three. But somewhere in this world, maybe in this room, there is a young woman, about my daughter's age, whose life has been permanently impoverished by my failure to have the son who would have one day swept her off her feet. And if I had cared about that other woman, wherever she is, I'll never know who she is. If I had cared about her as much as I care about my own daughter, I would have had that son. I didn't have the son because I was selfish. I understand selfishness. I'm on board with selfishness to a degree. I understand selfishness. What I don't understand is encouraging other people to be selfish, which is what we see in these organizations like Zero Population. I just threw that one into related. It seems like there are a lot of people in the world. I know it seems like there are a lot of people in the world. The fact is, they all fit in the Grand Canyon if you stack them. Or, if you don't like that image, here's an image I got from Tom Sowell. Take the state of Texas, divide it up into house lots that are equal to the size of the average middle-class house lot in the United States. Take the average middle-class house in the United States that's sitting on a lot, divide the state of Texas up into lots that size. You've just housed the entire world's population. And you've still got Oklahoma for all the fast food joints. So, if your argument is that we are running out of space, we're nowhere near running out of space. We're not at that limit. And we're still, therefore, faced with the question of, would we rather have more or less? Why then, if there's all that space, is there all this enthusiasm for controlling the population, for keeping the size of the population down? Partly, I think, it's a psychological thing. It's easy to remember all the ways that other people annoy you, and easy to forget all the ways they've enriched your life. When you are stuck in traffic on a hot summer night, it's very easy to remember that if the guy in front of you had never been born, life would be a little better. And somehow it's easy to forget that if the guy who invented hard air conditioning had never been born, life would be a whole lot worse. You gotta reduce the population, you might get rid of both of those guys. All of the time, you are free riding on the ideas that other people have had. When you think about reducing the world population, it's not just the people who are in front of you right now you're talking about eliminating, it's also all the people who made it possible for you to live the life that you live. When you're standing in line at the supermarket, you remember that the person in front of you is making life a little worse, but maybe you forget about that stranger who helped you change your tire on a cold winter night. It's the thing that person was there. People in Charleston tell me that King Street gets too crowded from time to time, but they forget that if it weren't for the crowds, Charleston would be Hollywood. So here again is my chart. And again, I don't know for sure that the spillover benefits exceed the spillover costs. I strongly expect that they do. I know for sure that only by making charts like this can we answer the question. And I do believe that my guess is that if we were to increase the population, we would have more trading partners, we would have more friendship, more diversity, more ideas, more prosperity. We'd all have a better chance of finding love, and that's the kind of world I would like to leave to my children.
We have a few minutes for questions, so if people have questions, I'm sure Dr. Landsburg would be happy to take some.
Sir, why don't you include ideas and your spillover costs? Because not all ideas are positive or beneficial.
Absolutely not. The person who figures out how to set off a nuclear bomb in downtown Detroit is probably the person who should have. So absolutely, some ideas are ideas that go in the cost. Here's the cost box. That's certainly true. The history of humanity has been, up till now, that I think almost nobody, at least if they understood what life was like 150 years ago, almost nobody would want to go back to that. 150 years ago, people had 8 kids and did not expect them all to make it to adulthood. That's no longer true because of ideas that people had. You spent your day sweltering in a factory or in a field or in a kitchen. That was normal life for everyone. I don't think anybody wants to go back to that, and it's ideas that have led us out of that. Could have some ideas, would it be better if we could have kept all the good ideas and none of the bad ones? Yes, it would have been better. Could some bad idea in the future end up outweighing all of the good ideas? Absolutely it could. But so far, the path we've been following has been that the good ideas have done far more good than the bad ones have done harm. And I'm extrapolating from that. I don't know, I did an extrapolation earlier. I talked about a conservative extrapolation of income where 400 years from now, people are going to be earning $1 million a day. Do I know that's true? I know it's a conservative extrapolation. But of course, all kinds of things could happen between now and then that make it false. An asteroid could wipe us all out tomorrow. So you make your best guesses, and I absolutely agree with you that it would not be unreasonable to put more weight than I have put on the potential bad ideas.
So with our constant growing population, do you think we'll run out of things that sustain us, like clean water or food?
Well, and again, if you talk about running out of stuff, and what I want to encourage you to focus on is that it's not a question of whether the world's going to run out of stuff, it's a question of whether your family's going to run out of stuff. If your family is having trouble getting water or having trouble getting food, then your parents are going to take in account of that and decide to have fewer kids. Each individual family can make decisions. They can say, are we running out of resources? If we're running out of resources, we want to have fewer kids. If we are, if we're feeling very rich, if we're feeling like we can support a lot of kids, we can choose to have more. If I have more kids, insofar as that stretches my resources a little more thinly, that doesn't have to be your problem. Now, again, as I said, I'm repeating myself. It becomes your problem if my family decides to come out and start stealing things from you. And I agree with that. But I also want to emphasize, and I think people overlook this, that to a very large extent, this is not a world problem, it's an individual family problem. Families do run low on resources, and when they run low on resources, they choose to have fewer kids. And we see that all over the world, very sensitive, across cultures, across income groups. Families adjust their family size, parents adjust their family sizes very sensitively. There's a lot of data on this, to changes in economic conditions. People get a little richer, they have more kids. People get a little poorer, they have fewer. The Austrian government did an amazing controlled experiment for us about 30 years ago, when they suddenly, without warning, and it was without warning, so it was a very clean, controlled experiment, they passed a law that said if you have, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it was surprisingly small. It said if you have a second child while your first child is under the age of 2, we'll give you something like $2,000 or $3,000. You got a 15% increase in the number of families having a second child while the first one was under 2. Huge response to a very small economic incentive. And then you can ask, well, were these families that were going to have a second child anyway, and they just had a little sooner to get the money, or did they actually have a second child? And you can answer that by looking 15 years out and seeing that these families really are larger than other families. So this was a decision not just to change the timing, it was a decision to have another child based on a relatively small amount of money, which suggests that people are making very fine calculations here. People are making very careful calculations about how many kids to have. And if resources are running low, again, it doesn't matter if resources are running low for the world. It matters if they're running low for you. If they're running low for you, you will choose to have 3 kids. Question?
What about the cost of death and disease, evil?
Death and disease, again, you want to separate the private part of that out from the spillover. If diseases are contagious,
Too many
then,
people.
pardon me?
Too many people.
If diseases are contagious, then that's a reason to wish that there were fewer people. On the other hand, all it takes is one guy like Jonas Salk to outweigh an awful lot of the cost that is done by bringing people into the world who got spread fully. So, yes, people infecting other people with disease is bad, and certainly goes into hospitals. Yes?
Do you think that in certain parts of the world where populations become so dense that people are starting to run into a sort of Malthusian trap, that there's some justification for population control policies like maybe some places in China?
I'm not sure what parts of the world you have in mind. I mean, if you look at Africa, what you see all over Africa is, my data on this are 15 and 20 years old, but I don't think that has changed. What you see all over Africa is in sparsely populated regions, there are no hospitals, there is very little in the way of markets, there's a very, very high infant mortality, bad medical outcomes, bad style of life, lots of people living only a little above the subsistence level, and when population for one reason or another starts to grow in those areas, as the population grows, it becomes efficient to start introducing modern methods of farming, it becomes efficient for a doctor to move into the area, and quality of life rises substantially. And again, my numbers on this are 15 or so years old, but I don't think it's changed. Looking at it then, all over Africa, what you saw was these little pockets of poverty that would become richer as they became more populated. So I'm not sure if there are other specific parts of the world you have in mind, but I think the evidence is pretty strong that population has been a good thing. Population growth has been a good thing in large parts of the world.
One of the consequences of our success the last couple of years is obviously the increase in longevity.
Yes.
As longevity increases, birth rates continue to decline. And I would submit that we're poised on the brink of a significant increase in longevity. In fact,
God, I hope so.
Yeah. And I'm focused very heavily
haven't thought about, too much about the consequences of greater longevity. Of course, I talked about the gift of life and said I was going to ignore that as a benefit, but it is a big benefit. If people are living longer, then they're living longer and they presumably are glad to be living longer. I think we should be happy about that. And so I guess, if you've got elderly relatives you're taking care of, that might cause you to decide to have fewer children, so it could play into birth rates that way. On the other hand, if you've got grandparents around to help with child care, you might decide to have more children. So I don't know any data on how having old people around affects childhood. It's a great question. I can see it going either way. I'm taking care of a mother-in-law now who needs a lot of care, and if I were still in an age group where I was thinking about having another child, that would play into that. We're talking about having a child. On the other hand, my parents sure made it a lot easier in the first few years when I had a child, and I ended up not having a second child, but I think I was made more likely to have a second child because my parents were around and they could help. So I don't know which way that goes on balance, and I don't know. Really
We might have time for maybe one more question.
Yeah.
So people who advocate for population control on the basis of the environment and pollution, what would you say counteract their argument, just that fact that we have an increased population would increase the ideas that can actually fix that problem?
Pollution is totally a cost that goes in my spillover cost numbers. And in principle, it would be a big enough cost that we would want to say, yeah, we're over the limit, we want more. But what you need to keep in mind is to make a fair comparison and recognize that every kid who gets born is not only a potential polluter, but also a potential discoverer of ways to ameliorate the pollution problem, a potential discoverer of new ways to produce things that cause less pollution. And you want to be sure that you account for all of that in your calculations.
Time here, I want to thank you all for coming out. Take an opportunity again to thank Dr. Landsburg,